Hey everyone, welcome back to JP's Budget Collecting and our weekly look back at the hot comics from 6 months ago. This week we're looking back at the hot comics from June 3rd, 2022, and I'm recording this on December 2nd, 2022. As always, I give you those dates so you know when this list is when this information is most relevant, because comics are always moving and changing, market's always moving and changing, so a few weeks from now, something may come out. This may not be as relevant or as accurate as it was when I recorded it. So, as always, also, we're looking at the CBSI Hot Top 10 for that week and the Comic Tom Key Collector Hottest Trending Comics of the Week. This week, a little caveat before we dig into the list, in that I did a cash or trash, so I have predictions for some of them, but Tom's video was a little bit late. In order for me to get a cash or trash in, I had to do it before he released it. So I only have predictions for the CBSI books. So the 8 books that weren't overlaps between the two lists that were on Tom's list, I didn't get predictions, and I actually had forgotten to put the information down until this week. So there was no way I could make predictions either before or after. So I just was for those books, you're just getting what they've done without me making my little predictions that are sure to go wrong. As always, also just a reminder, we do this so that we understand what factors made these books hot and what factors have continued to affect them, then keep them hot or make them drop in value, which if you've been watching in 2022 has almost always been drop in value, mainly both because of the general factors that are happening, but also just the market downturn in general as well. Another function of me missing out on doing cash or trash back then for both lists is that we're not in our usual order where we kind of lump books by categories. So there's like the CBSI books, and then the last 8 are the Tom books I didn't have down. So without further ado, let's dig into this list because we do have 18 books to talk about. First up, we have Catwoman number 43, the Sozumaki variant. Right there. For the third week in a row, this 1 in 25 made the list. In week 1, it was basically 75, 3 times ratio. By week 2, it was up to 175. By week 3, it was 2 to 250 for raw copies of this book. Now it's $40 to $100, which would have made it pretty good if you got in that first week, but not so great if you waited later, especially to this third week. 9.8 only cost you $120 to $200 for non-signed copies. Yeah, this is a dumpster fire. It's about a 68%, I think, drop in value for those raw copies if you waited to that third week. So yeah, it just goes to show you most of these books, even the ones that continue to have pretty good value, which this one did, over peak, and in this case by a lot. So yeah, this one has definitely dropped back a ton. Next, we have another Catwoman cover, but this is Batman Killing Time number 4, the Ben Oliver 125 featuring Catwoman. This one was going for 60 to 70 for this 125, so not quite triple. Usually means it's going to end up around between ratio and double. That's exactly what happened here. It's now a $25 to $45 book. 9.8 on this, only one recent sale that was $71. So this one turned into a trap, dropped back considerably from what it was. So both of these Catwoman books from this week were not great. And as you're going to go through this list, you're going to see there's a lot of these that drop significantly. There's not a lot of I'll be backs in this list. There's a lot of traps and dumpster fires, but there's a few that aren't. Next, we have Batman number 423, the MegaCon exclusive foil variant by Todd McFarlane. So they made a foil variant of Batman 423, this famous McFarlane cover that they sold at MegaCon as a con exclusive. Back then, this thing was doing $400 for this cover for raw copies. Now it's at $125 to $200. There was a single outlier sale for a raw copy of around $400. That's one of the most recent sales. It's like the second or third most recent sale when I looked at it. Now it's but now 9.8 can be had for $250 to $400. That $400 sale is definitely an outlier overall. And overall, this definitely turned into a trap. Another book that has come tumbling back down. Not that odd for con exclusives, and yeah, I mean at the time this was going for more than the original was going for, so just to give you an idea how crazy that was. Next, we have Department of Truth number 18, the Todd McFarlane number 1 in 100. This is on the list for the second week in a row. We talked about this last week. By this point, last week it was like 175 on 1 in 100. By this point, it was 300 plus. Now it's 100 to 125, 9.8, one sale going for 250. So yeah, another dumpster fire, another book that it just came plummeting back down. If you'd bought it the first week, you would have lost a little bit of value, but not nearly like you did if you waited to that second week on this one. Next, still two more covers from the CBSI list. First up is Grimm number 1, the second print. I guess you'd call that cover. This probably should have been the Comic Buzz. Either way, raw copies for this second print were going for $30. Now it's a $5 to $15 book. 9.8 only cost you $37 to $45 plus shipping. So yeah, this is another dumpster fire. A lot of these, like Berserker or anything else, they just haven't had the legs. Everybody keeps thinking they're getting the next Something Is Killing the Children, and even it's dropped back now finally. And like not as much as these guys, but yeah, just haven't had the legs on some of these other indie series from Boom. Next, we got Amazing Spider-Man, the movie, number 1. This is the photo cover featuring Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone. And this was hitting the list because he was doing a signing at CGC. These are kind of hard to find. Back then, even low to mid-grade copies were going for $70 to $80 raw. Because they wanted that signature, knowing they'd be worth quite a bit, even beat up. Now a raw copy will cost you $20 to $70, depending on condition. Which high grade stuff going for around $70. So yeah, this is another one that's turned into a trap. It was really all about that signing, and now that that's come and gone, there's not really a huge interest in this particular book. Although it's still going for decent value, mainly because it's somewhat hard to find. Next, we got Miles Morales, number 38. The Scon 1 in 50, and this is also the first appearance of Billy Morales as Spider Smasher. We'll talk more about her later on the Tom list. But yeah, so she's on the cover here of this 1 in 50. But it hit the list, but it was only doing 75.80 on a 1 in 50, which means it's probably going to end up below ratio, which is exactly what it's done. $10 to $35 now for a raw copy. 9.8 only costs you $70 to $125. Another dumpster fire with a big drop in value on this one. I don't know where the storyline... I haven't been reading the Miles stuff. I don't know where the storyline went, but it has not had any sustaining value here for this Billy Morales book. Next, we got Avengers Forever, number 6. First appearance of Vibranium Man. So several of these Avengers Forever alternate universe versions of characters people were jumping on back then. This one was all the way up to 15 to 20 for raw copies back then. Now it's 2 to 10, but really it's basically cover plus shipping is really what you're looking at on this one. With occasionally going for a little more, but 9.8 only costs you 40 to 50, so not much more than the price of the book, of getting the book slab to begin with. So yeah, this one has also turned into a trap. Not a lot of value here on Vibranium Man. Next, we have, almost to the end of the CBSI list, we have a little bit of an oddity. We have Star Wars Rebels trade paperback. This was a limited edition, store thank you that stores got, I think, just one copy of. And it was going for $50. This trade was selling for $50 on the secondary market. Now it's 20 to 70. You could argue kind of worth it. There wasn't even a slab sale of a 9.8 for 150. But I still put this as steady. I'll be back because most of the sales are in that 30, 40-ish range, a 20 to 40-ish range, with just a couple 50, pushing that 50, 70 mark. The range is still definitely there for this trade, but it's been pretty steady, but more on the steady I'll be back side than the steady worth it side for me. Next, we have the second of our books. The other one was the foil cover, the Batman foil cover that actually made both lists. And this is Star Wars number 17, first appearance of Quinlan Voss, a Jedi who was name dropped during the Obi-Wan series. I think episode 3 is when they were talking about this. So this is when Obi-Wan was coming out. We got a name drop on a Jedi. He didn't appear, just got his name dropped. So people jumped all over this book. Raw copies were going 75 to 125 on this book. A 9.8 hit 435. That's 15 to 60. No recent 9.8 sales. This is another, with most of these sales around $20 or $30, 20 to 30. Yeah, this has turned into a dumpster fire. Just not a lot of interest in Quinlan Voss. This one has dropped way back. Guy's name dropped. People went crazy for it, which is always the worst time to buy a book on a character if you didn't have it already. But anyway, yeah. So that was the last book that I will have. You'll see my predictions on because, yeah, I didn't go back and look at Tom's list until this week. So next, and I just put these are in no particular order. These are in the order that they talked about them on the video outside the two that were overlaps. So there's no category overlap here. So first up, we got Willow #1 from 1988. This is the adaptation of the original movie for a comic. And yeah, this had to do with the trailer dropping at a Disney event for the show that's now streaming. I think it started streaming this week. So yeah, it's streaming on Disney Plus now. So they were bringing Willow back for a new series on Disney Plus. That's what caused this book to hit the list. Back then, raw copies were going for $20. 9.8 hit 370. So given the standpoint, oh, sorry, I looked at the wrong list. Raw copies were $20. 9.8 hit 400. Excuse me. But looked at the wrong line on my spreadsheet. But now, despite that, with it coming out right now, it's a $10 to $20 book, 9.8, 375. So it's still actually down just a little bit of an I'll be back, even with the series actually coming out right now. Maybe with it launching this week, maybe we'll get a little bit of a uptick in values, and maybe it's even already happened since I got values on Thursday night. But yeah, it's definitely taken a step back, even though small one, but even though with the series coming out, it is down just a touch. Next, we have Raiders of the Lost Ark #1. This is the first appearance of Indiana Jones in a standard comic. It's actually a reprint of Marvel Super Special #18, which is like his first actual appearance in the comic, but that's magazine size. Kind of like they did that for Boba Fett, kind of like the, where they first printed it in an adaptation of a movie in a magazine size, bigger size, and then they moved it into they reprinted it in a standard comic. This was going for $12 back then, 9.8, 370, with news about the Indiana Jones 5 coming. We actually got a trailer yesterday when I looked up values last night. So back then it was $12, $370 for a 9.8. Now it's $5 to $20, $370 to $400 for a 9.8. I saw a little bit of an uptake in sales last night when I was writing down values, but no real movement in value yet. Maybe by the time this airs on Saturday, if you go look, you might see that. But as of the moment when I was writing down values last night before I went to bed, and now recording this, haven't seen that uptick in value yet. Just a slight uptick in sales. Otherwise, the value's basically been what it's been over the last few months, which is basically where it was at back in the spring. So this has been pretty steady. Worth it so far to this point, since we got that news. But it was fairly cheap to begin with for, an Indiana Jones key. But yeah, so it's been fairly cheap, still that way as of when I wrote this down and recorded it. Next, we got Miles Morales, Spider-Man #13. This is the first appearance of Billy Morales. We talked about the cover there with Billy getting brought into the storyline from some alternate future or whatever. Her first appearance was also jumping up. Raw copies back then were going for $50. 9.8 hit 177. Now raw copy will cost you $15 to $35. 9.8 will cost you $80 to $125. So another one that turned into a bit of a trap. No real buzz around Billy Morales at the moment. All right, next we got our one cover from the Tom list, which is Amazing Spider-Man #2, the Derek Chew 1 in 25. And this one, I'll fully admit, didn't make any sense why it was on the list. It was only going for $15 to $25 on a 1 in 25. That's usually not what I would consider a hot variant. Now it's $15 to $30. So I guess you could call it steady worth it because there's a couple sales a little higher. But yeah, I don't think this book was ever hot. It was just like you get a 1 in 25 for $15 to $25. That's pretty typical for most 1 in 25s that don't really take over the market in a big way, like some of those ones we talked about earlier. So just surprised this was ever on the list, I'll be honest. Next, we have Star Wars: The High Republic Adventures Annual #1. This has got a few first appearances in it. It's got the first appearance of Bell Zettifer and his Charhound Ember, which is what a lot of people originally spec'd on this for, but it also has the first appearance of Porter Engle. And basically it hit the list because we got news that in Phase 2, Porter was going to get his own series. Like, he's an old man in Phase 1, and you hear about the Blade of Vendetta or whatever, and that he had, he was this famous Jedi. Well, now we're getting that story here in Phase 2, so that was what prompted that. But I think that issue should come out really soon. Here in the next couple of weeks, I think that issue is going to come out, if it hasn't already. Well, it hasn't already because I don't have it yet. So, but yeah, in the next couple of weeks, we should get the first issue of that little mini series. So back then, jumped up to $25, 9.8 hitting 100 to 150. Now it's 15 to 35. So the raw copies are kind of fairly steady, but 9.8s are down to 50 to 100. So overall, I put this kind of down. I'll be back. You could maybe argue steady. I'll be back, but it's definitely down on the 9.8 side for sure. So we'll see if they ever do anything more with these High Republic characters, but we're just now in the Phase 2 of the written part of the comics and the books. My guess is we'll get all the way through all 3 phases before they try to start really adapting any of these characters to other media. Next, we have Horizon Zero Dawn, #1, and this is an option book, really late in the list, I know, but like I said, I didn't really move these around just to get them included. And this had to do, obviously this is based on a game. This is a comic based on a game, but we got news about Netflix adapting this into either a show or a movie. I'm not really sure. They didn't write it down or weren't specific, and I didn't look it up, I'll be honest. But it was only going for $4 back then. So it was going for cover price, 9.8 for 50. There was just a bunch of sales because of this news, but it never really moved the value. So the value is still basically a couple bucks plus shipping, maybe $4, whatever total for this on eBay. So you put it as kind of a steady and I'll be back because there's not very many sales of this. Not a lot of interest in this book at all. It never was enough interest to really move the value. All right, 2 books left. Both are Star Wars related. Both are related to the Obi-Wan show that was coming out a little bit. First up is Star Wars #2. The first appearance of Obi-Wan Kenobi, of Han Solo, of Chewbacca, all in this, but it was jumping because of the Obi-Wan show. Back then, raw copies were averaging 200, although I have some questions about that, just, given some of the things I've learned in the few months since about how they average some of the values on some of these older books. But 9.8 hit 6,100. Now it's a $10 to $125 book, depending on condition. So, like, low-grade copies you can get for, like, $10. No big deal. Mid-grade stuff's going to cost you $30, $40, $50, somewhere in there. Higher stuff's going to cost you around $100 and a little more. 9.8, most recent 9.8 sale is only $3,000. So this has definitely turned into a trap. We've moved away from the show. We don't know if we're going to get more of Obi-Wan or not, but yeah, not a lot of interest in it at the moment. So it is definitely backed up. And our last book of the week is Star Wars Obi-Wan #1 from the 2022 series. And this hit the list for another CGC signing. They announced a Ewan McGregor signing, so people were kind of jumping on these. Lots of sales of this book on the secondary market. But it was only $4 back then. It's still a $4 cover price book. 9.8 will still only cost you $50. Yeah, another one that's steady and I'll be back just because it was values never really moved to begin with. It's been cover price. So that is our list this week. We had a ton of dumpster fires and traps. Not a lot of even I'll be backs. It was a really poor week. We did have several steady books, but 3 of them weren't really, I didn't really consider hot to begin with in terms of value. So yeah, they were steady in value because they were super cheap even then. So that's this week's list. I want to thank you guys for watching, and we will catch you next time.